Okay, I think we can get started here. Thank you all again for joining this GEP and Everest Group webinar, Building a Collaborative, Agile, and Resilient Supply Chain with Data and Analytics. A couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions during this webinar, down on the right-hand side, please enter it into the chat, and we'll be sure to get to those questions after this webinar. If by chance we run out of time, we'll be sure to get back to you as quickly as possible. Now, to do a quick introduction of our speakers, the first person that we have today is Shirley Hung, who is with the Everest Group, and she's been a partner with them for a number of years, and we've partnered with her many a times on some of our webinars, so welcome back, Shirley. And then also from GEP, we have Alex Zong, who's one of our directors of product marketing, and also Pranav, who's one of our vice presidents of consulting. So thank you guys very much for participating in today's webinar. And Shirley, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I have to give a little bit of fair warning right now. Dallas is undergoing some spring storms, and so hopefully you're hearing me okay, and you're not hearing the rain outside my window at the moment. But I'm thrilled to be here today with Alex and with Pranav to talk about this really important topic around supply chain resiliency and collaborative environment and the technology that can be leveraged to ensure that that happens. Just as a very brief introduction, in case you haven't heard of Everest Group, we are a research firm that focuses on services. We work to monitor all kinds of different services markets, like IT services, business process services, engineering services, global business services, so all kinds of service models that are out there. And we work with all kinds of stakeholders within this marketplace to ensure that we're supporting the maturity of these services types of offerings. One of the programs that we oversee is research in the area of procurement and also for supply chain. So that is the context in which I am here with you today. I just kind of want to kick off with a study that we conduct every year. So towards the end of every year, we issue a key issue study to understand what is top of mind for business leaders as they enter into the new year. And for 2023, as you can see here, price and cost pressures really rose to be the top challenge that businesses were worrying about. Other top-ranked challenges also relate to the economic uncertainty that was looming, with the evolving customer needs, slowdown in demand, as well as a slower decision-making. While we see that talent and skills shortage remains a top 3 concern, the softening in the talent market that we're all seeing, as well as the rise in exciting technologies such as generative AI. You can't skip a session without talking about generative AI. That really means that we are hearing a lot less about talent shortage than we have been in the recent past. Alex, why do you think the cost pressure really is the top issue these days for business leaders?
Thanks, Shirley. I think there are a few recent trends about cost pressure to become a top issue. I think number one is inflation. Obviously, higher inflation can lead to higher costs for raw materials, transportation, and other inputs, right? And then supply chain disruptions. They have been a major challenge for companies in recent years. These disruptions can result in higher costs due to increased transportation costs and material shortages. And then I think one other thing is labor shortages. The ongoing labor shortage in many industries these days can lead to higher labor costs. I think those are the top ones I can consider. I can think the trends brought cost pressure to the top.
Thank you, Alex. And certainly we'll be talking about a lot of those kinds of factors a bit more through the course of this webinar. At this point, what we'd like to do is to hear from you. Now that we are well into 2023, we're curious actually whether your priorities have changed since when we did the key issues study a few months ago. So you should see a poll pop up on your screen now. Please do select one. What is your highest priority at the moment? Is it still cost reduction or cost management? Is it risk management? How about supply chain resiliency and sustainability? Or are you concerned about ensuring effective collaboration across your stakeholder ecosystem? Or finally, there is a choice around supply chain agility and being able to, respond fast to changing conditions. So again, really interested in getting your view on what is your highest priority at the moment: cost reduction, management, cost management, risk management, supply chain resiliency and sustainability, stakeholder collaboration, or supply chain agility. We'll give you another moment or so to make your choice.
And Shirley, it looks like it's slowing down here a little bit. So let me share the results of this one.
Perfect. Okay. So it looks like cost reduction and cost management is still very much top of mind. And in close second is actually supply chain resiliency and sustainability, which actually, in some ways makes sense given the self-selective nature of this audience here today. But Pranav, what do you think about these results?
Yeah, I think these reflect what I as a practitioner see among my clients day in and day out, and it is, it is telling to point out like the number 1 and 2 here, right? Cost reduction and resiliency and sustainability. They are sometimes seen as conflicting goals, right? So that, in the last 2 years or the first 2 years of COVID, I would say clear priority was resiliency and sustainability, and people were willing to make investments in that because it was a revenue loss otherwise. But now it is coming back to a situation where it is a trade-off, and with a recession or something looming, there is a indecisiveness because you reduce cost, but at the same time you want to continue to invest in your resiliency. So it is becoming a difficult decision from the investment standpoint for supply chains.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for that. Okay. Well, as we had just discussed, the macroeconomic environment certainly is presenting a lot of challenges in terms of inflation and widening labor shortages. And while these might be shorter term type of issues, they are putting a lot of pressure on supply chains. Other factors that are impacting supply chain include more medium term or longer term issues around geopolitical instability and or challenges and sustainability type of focus. So for example, we've seen that the Russia-Ukraine war is having ripple effects on global supply chains. It's impeded the flow of important commodities and also impacting logistics and transportation. And if we think about, the ongoing trade wars and tensions between countries such as China and Taiwan, which is very close of heart for me because I come from Taiwan, that's causing a lot of product shortages and disrupting global freight as well. So, these are concerns, as well as kind of coupling these concerns with increased scrutiny on sustainability, right? Organizations are working hard to adhere to evolving regulatory and compliance requirements, delivering on environmental, social, and governance, or what we commonly call ESG objectives, and ensuring that data security are adding to, all of this is adding to the risks and pressures that organizations are facing. So having the ability to navigate through these challenges and handle disruptions is really now a table stakes for organizations to operate in the global marketplace. Alex, is this what you're observing as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think what you covered absolutely what I've seen in the market. One thing I want to mention here, actually, there have been a few movements in the last decade, right? These are the reason I think contributed to today's increasing challenges in supply chain risk. So number one is globalization. The increasing interconnectedness of global economy has led to greater reliance on international supply chains, which are more complex and difficult to manage. And I think second is just-in-time inventory. It allows companies to reduce inventory costs, but it can also leave organizations vulnerable to supply chain disruptions, as they may not have enough inventory on hand to meet demand when disruptions happen in supply chain. And then I think supplier consolidation, which procurement and sourcing organizations been practicing for over a decade now. So in order to reduce costs and streamline operations, many organizations have consolidated their supplier base, but this could also create risk, right? If a key supplier experiences a disruption, that can affect the entire supply chain. And then cyber security threats we've seen these days. As supply chain become increasingly digitized, organizations face a growing risk of cyber attacks that can disrupt operations both in their own systems and their suppliers' systems.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex, for that. So, in this increasingly complex world, to effectively address these challenges that we just described, it is vital to look at the end-to-end supply chain. So what I'm showing here on this slide is an Everest Group visual of the supply chain and how it connects to the other kind of adjacent functions, such as procurement and finance. And as you can see here, given the high degree of dependency between procurement and supply chain, it is critical to consider the linkage between these functions. Its sourcing processes really enable supply chain resiliency and agility. And as interrelated functions within an organization, it is important for procurement processes such as sourcing, supplier management, contract management, to be well connected to supply chain processes such as demand planning and inventory management. However, we often see that these two functions are disconnected sometimes, or more disconnected than we would like it to be. And part of the reason is that oftentimes there's a lack of a common unified technology solution. And this really impacts the speed in which organizations can make critical decisions. And this really becomes quite a challenge during times of disruption, when speed of action becomes incredibly important. So, Alex, I know that you have some additional data to share from a recent study on some of these issues. Are those study results really validating these points?
Yeah, absolutely. You will see later. I'll show a little bit. Yeah, here, this is a slide. So we, GEP, did a survey, a supply chain study with NC State University. We surveyed across the globe over 200 senior leaders in supply chain, procurement, IT organization, and some finance organization, but they are all top leaders. The outcome is very interesting, right? So let me talk a little bit here. We know that there are some common gaps in supply chain, which cause many operational problems. A supply chain study that we just did here, right, found that the number one gap of all common supply chain gaps is actually between procurement and supply chain. I don't know if it's a surprise for you, but the gap actually reflected a lack of coordination, communication, and integrated process between these two functions. For example, if procurement teams does not communicate effectively with supply chain teams, they may order goods that are not fully aligned with the production needs. And then this can result in excess inventory, increase transportation costs, and supply shortages even, right? On the other hand, if the supply chain team does not collaborate effectively with the procurement team, they may not have the necessary information about suppliers, which can result in increased cost and risk. So I think we can move on to the next, and let's look at a little bit more here. And in the survey, we ask about the consequence of the gap. As you can see here, the consequence negatively hit all key KPIs, including cost, lead time, and risk controls, right? It is probably not very hard to understand. If procurement and supply chain are not aligned, it can result in insufficient purchasing decisions, like I mentioned earlier, right? So the order of wrong qualities, quantities, and price can bring this impact. And it can also lead to delays in deliveries, which increase lead time or increase supplier risk, supply chain risk, and compliance risk due to supplier failures and logistic disconnect and poor qualities, etc. But I think the positive side, right? On the other hand, if the gap is bridged by the right process and tools, the benefit gain here could be very significant, right? So I think it is very important for us to look at this and say this is really an area which may be known to many supply chain procurement professionals or leaders, which may be ignored by others, right? And if you look at sourcing and procurement, it's actually itself is a very important function in supply chain. So starting right, starting effectively would be a big impact or contribution on positive side to supply chain overall. If we move on to next, and this is also very interesting insight, right? So we try to reveal why such disconnect or misalignment happens, right? So I think the misalignment gap between procurement and supply chain might have come from the different priorities they focus on. So as this survey, you can see here, revealed, right? It might not be a surprise to many of you. Procurement primarily focused on cost, while supply chain is on on-time delivery. But I think what is important here is that the difference between priorities does not necessarily cause the problem, as most people might think. I think the real problem is the lack of communication and collaboration between the two functions while they try to accomplish their priorities. So yeah. I think that's it's interesting, right? I think just look at these data.
Yeah, I find this really kind of interesting because a lot of the conversations these days are around technology and how technology is going to solve a lot of these challenges. And we're certainly going to talk a bit about how technology can be leveraged to to help address some of these issues. However, a lot of these issues really are evolve from very human type of issues. You know, in this case, lack of communication or misaligned incentive structures, right? Or priorities in this kind of case. So that human component really is driving a great deal of both the success, I would say, as well as the challenges. All right, so at this point, we're flying through the webinar. We do want to turn it back to you again. We want to hear from you about technology. You know, technology can play a really critical role in ensuring that supply chain resiliency and agility is optimized, but you know, gaps and challenges really still exist in the current supply chain technology environments. And we're listing a couple of them here, and we would really like to understand from you, when you're thinking about your current supply chain technology ecosystem, what is your primary, I would say, headache? Is it the limited ability to capture and transfer real-time data? Is it, you know, what we just talked about, the disparities between procurement and supply chain? How about inefficiency in the way that you organize, process, and manage data? Or the limited interoperability across systems and platforms. And then finally, you know, we certainly need to talk about IT as a separate function as well. And oftentimes there's misalignment between supply chain teams and their IT colleagues. So again, we're asking for your view on what is your primary kind of gap when it relates to supply chain technology. Is it your ability to leverage real-time data? Is it the gap between procurement and supply chain? Is it the way that you work with data? Is it the inability to really work across systems and platforms? Or is it a disconnect between IT and your supply chain teams? So
Okay, it looks like the votes have slowed up here, so I'm going to share the results with everyone.
Great. Okay, so this one is a little bit less clear cut. It looks like, you know, it's a close race between data challenges and also the different, you know, being able to work across different systems and platforms, and also not to be discounted is really and maybe this is coordinated as well, the ability to capture and transfer real-time data, which is absolutely critical when it comes to supply chain resiliency. Pranav, what do you think about these results?
Yeah, I think so. The third and fourth option here, right, which is you know at the top in terms of responses, I think those have been issues for supply chain systems, for procurement systems, for for decades, right? So that has been the core frustration for many a supply chain practitioner, including myself, that there's a lot of technology deployed, well-intentioned, but if it all cannot interoperate with each other and you can't share, manage data across each other, then the full impact of that technology is never felt. And you inevitably find teams going offline and working in Excel sheets eventually, which is not ideal. I do think that the first two options here are emerging issues. So the real-time data became a very burning need as soon as COVID hit, and then since then, in all the disruptions we've faced since then, right? So that there is no silver bullet answer to real-time data, but technologies are getting there. But that is a burning new issue and it is likely to remain up there. And as we had discovered from our study and what we are hearing recently, the disparities between procurement and supply chain data would be another issue, which is, so these two are going to emerge as more important issues going forward as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, when we consider the supply chain technology environment, we all know that many organizations have traditionally relied on, large standalone systems such as material requirements planning or MRPs, or enterprise resource planning or ERP type of systems. However, these types of systems are inflexible. They're not adaptable. And they often struggle to cope with the real world uncertainties and disruptions that we're seeing, such as, supplier defaults or logistics delays due to blockages within routes, or manufacturing breakdowns, right? So some of that real-time data that Pranav kind of just talked about. Over the years, organizations have worked to update their technology stacks to address these limitations, and they do so really by applying some additional solutions. And some of these are shown here in this schematic. For example, many organizations really try to focus on specific processes within their supply chain through their technology implementation. So they'll look at order management systems, or transportation management systems, or warehouse management systems. And often, these solutions will use automation and analytics for various use cases in these areas, such as order automation and route optimization. However, these siloed systems really can't address and optimize the overall value chain for supply chain. For example, if we take OMS, leveraging the OMS system might help an organization select the best inventory and fulfillment location. But without that end-to-end visibility over both order and logistics management, the data it uses to determine the location is limited, and it makes any kind of recommendation really suboptimal, right? So it certainly seems like technology investments have enabled organizations to really optimize silos within different functions, rather than across, the functions. Alex, would you tend to agree with that?
Absolutely. I think you just pointed out a very important perspective, right? Is instead of going deep, right? I think modern supply chain really need to the broader collaboration perspective. So I think while ERPs are essential, right, for managing operational processes, the needs for modern supply chain systems go way beyond that. And modern supply chains are very complex with multiple partners, processes, and systems involved. And supply chain management require real-time visibility, collaboration, and optimization to ensure efficiency, agility, and resiliency, right? Therefore, modern supply chain systems need to have additional multi-enterprise, multi-tier capabilities, such as end-to-end visibility, partner collaboration, and advanced analytics, etc.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I completely agree. So I want to spend a couple of moments here. I know that this slide can be a little bit busy here, but I do want to talk about a very important issue that's dear to my heart, which is data and analytics. Data and analytics really can help bridge some of these gaps that we've been discussing in typical supply chain technology environments. Supply chain analytics really can bring together the data that exists across different applications or infrastructure technologies, third-party sources, to really improve visibility, gain real-time insights, and ultimately drive more actionable and better decision-making. Better visibility can increase flexibility in the supply chain network by helping key decision makers, visualize KPIs and evaluate different scenarios and run if-then analysis. Ultimately, there's many potential use cases across supply chain, from the planning stages to make manufacture, delivery, and after sales, as we're showing here. And while the current adoption levels for analytics vary across these different use cases, it really is undeniable, if you look at the scale on the right, that the potential to leverage data and analytics to a greater extent is extremely high in supply chain. We do detail many of these use cases in a research report that we recently published, which GEP is really fantastically making available to you. So I do encourage you to check it out for further inspiration as you're kind of thinking about how you can transform your supply chains. So Alex, back to the NC State study. What did it say about supply chain technologies?
Yeah, sure. Let's look at it. I think it's very interesting. Your previous slides look at the opportunities right across the board. As we know in supply chain, the plan, the buy, the make, and the delivery right across the board. But I think from this NC State study we conducted, pointed out something very interesting as well from technology perspective. If you look at the screen, it's the most important technologies to address today's supply chain challenges. This has been recognized by these supply chain and procurement leaders. Number one is supply chain visibility solutions. I think this is probably not a surprise, but it's so important. It is especially important in today's globalized supply chain. Supply chain visibility solutions provide real-time insights into all aspects of supply chain, enabling organizations to make informed decisions, identify bottlenecks, and mitigate risks. And then the second is supplier collaboration solutions. Collaboration tools such as supplier portals, purchase order, collaborations, and shared workflows help organizations streamline processes, reduce lead times, and enable orchestration. They also foster better relationship between partners, enabling joint problem solving, innovation, risk management, and value creation. And then from there, analytics applications can help make sense of vast amount of data generated by supply chain processes, which is tremendous as we know these days, and becoming more and more, right? Doing that will enable them to identify patterns, trends, and insights. This critical capability for building supply chain agility and resiliency. So we can move on to the next one. And this is a view, I feel it's interesting when we look at what's happening in supply chain. And we've seen actually many supply chain convergences happening in the past decade, and especially in the past few years. Supply chain convergence means the alignment and the integration of different parts and aspects of supply chain to work in a more aligned, streamlined, and a collaborative way. It's like different streams coming together to become one big flow. Right? This convergence is a natural evolution moving towards supply chain orchestration, which aims to optimize end-to-end flows of goods and resources across the entire supply chain. And supply chain convergence reflects the need for a more integrated and holistic approach to manage supply chain. And by aligning different aspects of supply chain, organizations can improve the efficiency, agility, and resiliency, and leading to obviously a better business performance and customer satisfaction. And so, as you can see, visibility, collaboration, and analytics definitely is very important elements to enable the convergence. But one thing I want to also point out, as we saw earlier in the survey outcome, right, the convergence between procurement and supply chain. In the earlier poll questions, that wasn't very high, as we saw in the study from this group, right? But I think that study actually reveals something very important. Procurement is not only the starting point of supply chain. Obviously, procurement is part of supply chain. So when we say procurement and supply chain, we mean procurement and the rest of supply chain, right? It's a starting point. But I think one thing even more important is procurement is that key, right? Is that key element connecting the enterprise with the outside world, the upstream suppliers and partners. And as we know, the downstream obviously is the customers, right? And for years, customer connections are also being built, and companies try to do a good job connecting to customers. But I think what was a little bit neglected or didn't have enough investment is the upstream. Now, after the 3 years COVID and other disruptions happening, I think leaders more and more recognize that is a very weak link that need to be addressed for supply chain to have better performance and even to be successful or say to survive and to be successful. Let's look at next. I think we can talk a little bit about the collaboration perspective, since we talked about the collaboration with suppliers. Based on a research by University of Tennessee at Knoxville, high maturity of supply chain collaboration can yield 30% savings. That is significant, right? So I think it's very important for us to spend even a couple minutes here to really look at this aspect of collaboration. And I think I wanted to share basically 3 points here. So number one, collaboration is not simply communication like many people think, or random interactions to do something with other teams, right? Technology-enabled and process-based collaboration at higher level maturity can greatly change how supply chain operates. Those originally one-way rigid processes will become two-way dynamic processes, which would allow faster and smoother supply chain flows. And that means what? Agility, efficiency, and resiliency. And point number two, modern collaboration should focus more on partner collaboration instead of the collaboration between just the internal teams. Multi-party, multi-tier collaboration is key for overall supply chain performance. And number three, the third point I want to say is that supply chain collaboration is not isolated actions. When different processes of collaboration are done on the same platform, data flow, right? We talk about data is so important. So data flow can converge to enhance visibility and provide insights to improve collaboration efficiency. That is why we believe a multi-dimensional and holistic collaboration platform is what companies need in today's environment. On such platform, real-time visibility, optimized information sharing, flexible workflow, and exception management are able to be accomplished. And so if you look at the notion of holistic collaboration, right? as showed here, and I probably don't have time to go into details, but obviously you can see these are the key components of what we call holistic collaboration. This brings together the key aspect of supply collaboration, which includes forecast collaboration, order collaboration, quality collaboration, inventory collaboration, and even cost collaboration. And this is cost collaboration is probably not many people think of. We try to drive down costs in supply chain. Try to beat up, usually we say, to our suppliers, right? So just make a cheaper a price for the supply. But how we really collaborate, even from cost perspective with supplier, would become more important for stability, resiliency, and even agility for supply chain. And lastly here, the risk perspective, I probably don't need to say, given the time left that we have. So I think we can move on to have Pranav, if you give us an audience some view from the real world practice that you are doing.
Sure, Alex. Thanks for that. I think so far what we've looked at, right, the key points that there are several gaps in the whole supply chain ecosystem that technology and data analytics can bridge. So I wanted to walk you through a couple of examples of how we've been able to bridge these gaps and where technology and data analytics could play a part. So just to, as Alex showed earlier, the top two areas where these gaps exist are visibility and collaboration. And again, collaboration meaning extended supply chain, not just inside the organization. So, I have a couple of examples. The first one is on visibility, the second on collaboration. The first one here is a very narrow example, and the second one, a much broader full conversions kind of example. So let's dive in, right? So this one is, we were working with a large, globally spread out life sciences organization, and it was having, like all of us did, a lot of issues with upstream supply chain visibility, raw materials inbound, stockouts and other issues going on which could affect their production. It goes back to even the supply chain and procurement gap which we were talking about, and it actually also goes out to lots of disparate systems, because again, this is an environment, large global corporation, multiple ERPs, multiple supply chain technologies deployed on top of those ERPs, but still they were having issues with that visibility. So what we were able to do here was put together what we called a supply risk data cube, pulling from a variety of systems, data points from their procurement systems, their supply chain systems, regional systems, pulling all of that together into one data lake, I would call it, and doing a lot of analytics from GEP side on top of that data to where we came up with this supply risk data cube, right? What that enabled the organization to do was, they could do risk profiling on their direct material suppliers. They could have near real time, not real time, but near real time track and trace capability into where their primary materials were. And we were able to provide a managed service layer on top of this to orchestrate that for them. But eventually, in front of this supply risk data cube, we were able to put a user-friendly front end so that at an executive level, someone could just look at all that data aggregated, quickly get an insight into where their risks are today, and then also point to the right actions that need to be taken to mitigate those risks. So and this is very narrow, as I said, right? Very just looking at upstream supply chain visibility, but also it had to be done in a very quick time period, simply because that was the need of the hour for a lot of us during when we were facing all these supply chain disruptions, right? And so I'll switch from this to a much broader convergence example where now cut to 1 year later, and we are still facing one disruption every quarter, right? So all of us are facing this environment where our supply chain has to jump from just in time to just in case, back to just in time all the time, right? And we saw the top 2 priorities at the start of this call. You the audience said your top 2 priorities are cost and resiliency. If it is cost, well, you need just in time. If it is resiliency, you need just in case, right? Unfortunately, our supply chains are like oil tankers or some big ships where you can optimize them, point them in a certain direction. If you point them in the just-in-time direction, they are going to go charging in that direction. The technology is optimized, the people are incentivized, everything goes in that direction. Then if you have to do just in case, well, it takes several miles and hours to turn around that ship at that point. So for us, we've lived through all this, and it has led to entire new models of using supply chain partners emerging from this, right? What some of our clients have realized is that the level of agility that is required here is simply not possible if you have a plethora of partners and one technology partner or multiple technology partners, service providers, internal team, all of them working together. So in this example, what they did was looked at just like a portion of their inbound supply chain and said, one partner, you take all of it. You do the technology layer to manage this. You provide the services on top of it. You are the vendor of record. You own the inventory. You do everything. We will give you a demand plan saying this is what our demand is going to look like. And your responsibility then is to make sure the right material, right raw materials reach the right facilities at the right time in the right quantity. That's it, right? Black box for us. You manage all of it. Once you have full ownership of all aspects of this, as you can see in the tightly integrated solution, you should be able to really optimize, deploy technology where it really is, and have like that full convergence coming to bear to provide the resilience that they need, right? We were able to do this, and again, the benefits are very, very tangible to the business. There is a one handshake relationship, like a resilience partner relationship, which is new as a business model itself. And it really maximizes the collaboration, not just inside their organization but also extended partners. And the operations become much more simplified. There is also a working capital reduction angle to this. But once all of this is in place, then the data that is mined through all of this operation can be analyzed to deliver literally continuous, I would say continuous improvement, which is again new in this environment for us, but is also increasingly becoming necessary if we are going to live forever in this one disruption a quarter situation. Then this tightly integrated a solution is going to become a competitive advantage. And so we've had a lot of pride and success in making that convergence come true, and we really hope that level of convergence becomes more widespread in the industry. So back to you, Shirley.
Thanks, Pranav. Really great examples of how some organizations are really tackling these kinds of challenges head on. I'd like to really just wrap up at this stage to summarize some of the key points that we've discussed over the course of the past 15 minutes or so. We've really I personally believe that the disruptions that we're seeing will continue. It's part of everyday life now. And therefore organizations really need their supply chains to be dynamic, intelligent, to be tightly integrated. Without that, they're really not going to be relevant, much less having a competitive advantage, to what Pranav just talked about before. But we are often seeing that procurement and supply chain gap is often leading to actually more disruptions, unnecessary disruptions, I would say. And there's also, collaboration gaps across the extended supply chain, and including those that are between external partners and the organizations themselves. Fortunately, though, we are seeing that new generation technologies can often serve as the glue that can help bridge these gaps if it's being leveraged appropriately. And in order to do that, following a convergent strategy, as Alex was describing, is really needed and critical to improve supply chain visibility. And finally, data and analytics within that convergent framework can not only bridge technology gaps to ensure that there's timely access to information, but also help define the strategy to mitigate risks in real time. So with that, I'd like to bring us to the questions part of the webinar. I think we have a couple of minutes left to answer a few questions. And I see, let me see. I guess the first question that I will direct is to Alex, if I may. What role do you think AI is going to play? You can't escape any conversation these days without talking about AI, but what role do you think AI will play going forward when you think about leveraging data and analytics to build a more resilient and supply chain?
Sure. This is a big question, and obviously these days we talk so much about AI, right? Especially from last year when ChatGPT became available to us. So I think definitely AI will play a huge role in supply chain. Why? If you look at what supply chain is rich at, what we have most, not the physical goods actually, right? Physical goods, yes, for sure, right? But data, enormous data come in and out supply chain. And with IoT, a device being installed more, right? It's incredible data. So I think supply chain at the point could be drowned by the ocean of data. I mean, if you can, but also you can surf on the ocean and be very free. And I think AI is such a tool that enables that the nice and beautiful surfing on the ocean, right? Because AI, if you look at what AI, I think it is such a capability to allow us to get insights, basically to get insights from the ocean of data, right? To summarize it, to find a pattern whatsoever, right? So that is so important. And you look at what are the key things that supply chain can rely AI on. I think a couple areas. One is prediction, obviously, because of the huge amount of data so you can detect the patterns. You can see anomalies, what the anomaly, and try to get alerts, right? But overall, within the prediction perspective, you can see what's up next. And then I think related is in the risk management area, that risk management is very complex task to do. With AI support, we can have a broader view and interpret it quickly. So which I think the informed action can really be done very quickly, right? And then optimization, automation, obviously a lot of business start to do that with AI to improve the productivity a lot, right? And I think most recently about ChatGPT is that the engagement, I think it's very, very important area that what human and machine can very well work with each other, right? With in ChatGPT type of capability, so that engagement will be brought to a very high level. That means I can retrieve information very quickly. I can give order very quickly and make optimized decision very quickly, right? So that is a very important perspective that AI help us to connect the unstructured data and structured data so that I can see both world very clearly and in real time. One last thing, I think it's very important for us, whoever on, we here in this discussion, the use case, right? I think it's to our creativity that it's important to really discover some new use cases to help supply chain to improve.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you mentioned ChatGPT, by the way. I'm very personally bullish about the potential of ChatGPT, and primarily it's because of the very low bar of change management that is required to be able to elicit benefits from it. People are using it straight away, right? I'm getting answers to my kids' questions very quickly without having to run Google searches. And if you pair that against another disruptive technology from, like blockchain, which is often talked about within the context of supply chain, it's kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to change management that's required to really get the value from implementing these technologies. So really, really excited to see how AI is going to be leveraged moving forward. All right, I think we might have a minute or two to take one more question. I'll direct that to you, Pranav. We've talked a lot about gaps in the supply chain, and to bridge those gaps, companies really need to evaluate the end-to-end supply chain, including the procurement processes. Can you share some of those best practices around collaboration?
Yeah. Since we have 2 minutes left, I'll just make 2 points. I think the first, most important in my mind is that when you look at collaboration or when you look at these gaps, don't look at your supply chain as within your 4 walls. Like, look at it as an extended supply chain. The more you can get everything from the mine to the customer to operate as one supply chain technology by bridging everything in between, the more agile, the more visible, the more collaborative it is going to be, right? So focus on that. Focus on almost like building the connections outside your 4 walls, not just inside. And the other thing I would say is don't hesitate to put in point solutions. I think the historically it was like, let's build this big shiny platform which will do everything, and it will take 3 years to implement and $40 million. But I think the new reality is, let's see what we can do in 6 weeks to fix this particular gap that we have right now, and we'll be agile about it and continue to evolve it. But don't wait for this big solve everything technology. Put in the analytics, put in the technology where it makes a difference today and tomorrow.
Great, thank you, Pranav. And with that, I think that's all the time that we have. Michael, do you want to say a few last words?
Yeah, thank you all very much. This is a great and very informative webinar today. We will be sharing the slides and also a recording of this presentation in the next couple of days, but thank you all very much. And also, if we did not get to your question today, we will be following up in the next 24 to 48 hours, so we'll be sure to answer those. Thank you all very much. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.